Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Please type your name and surname into the chat for our register. I want to say welcome to Mark DeFos and Will Bennett joining us from Linguistics to share about how they've been using Slack as a sort of space for discussion. So without further ado, over to you, Mark.
Okay. Hi. You need to mute your volume.
I'm muted.
No, your speaker.
Yeah, I'm getting some feedback from you guys, so just maybe mute when the other one speaks. Just signal to each other.
We have reinvented a new problem with remote teaching and learning by using Zoom while seated next to each other. So bear with us. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so we're here to talk about using online chat rooms and shared workspaces to facilitate student learning during lockdown. And we'll talk about some positive and negative experiences that we've had doing this for linguistics. If you'd like to play along at home, we have made a little sandbox or demonstration area of sorts on the Slack platform that we're going to be talking about. So there's that link that I have pasted into chat that's also on the slide. If you have no experience with Slack, that should prompt you to create an account and set you up if you want to play along. Okay, so obviously next slide. The problem that we are all facing is navigating constraints imposed by having to do remote or online teaching and learning during the present pandemic. I think that's not news to anyone. I think it's probably also not news to anyone here that we're facing this in the South African context, where we need to attend a little bit more carefully than a lot of, for instance, first world institutions would, to limits on student access and data, right? For our students to get online and to do remote teaching and learning is sort of more of a challenge than it might be in some other parts of the world. So what we're going to do today is to report on what we did in the first year linguistics course, which is basically we built on two platforms. One is RUconnected, which is the Rhodes in-house one, and the other is a platform called Slack, and that's why Nicola invited us to talk a little bit today. So in terms of structure of what we brought to say, we're going to first give an overview of how we saw some of the constraints and the challenges facing the students. Then I'll tell you a little bit about Slack, and then we'll share some reflections and lessons based on our experience using it in the Ling 1 course. Okay, so what are the challenges? Well, we know that there are a multitude of constraints imposed by remote teaching and learning. We also know that some of these obstacles are particularly relevant for students of the sort that Rhodes University has a lot of. So particularly poor Black students in the Eastern Cape face obstacles that are not necessarily present for students coming from different backgrounds. And we also know that some of these obstacles particularly affect synchronous learning. So what we wanted is to be able to have sort of a way of running our large first year course that would work around some of these problems. Yeah. So some of the problems we wanted to work around are, number one, social aspects. I'm sure you've all heard your own stories from your own students about situations at home that are perhaps not conducive to work. So we've heard of students who have to do things like work to supplement household income, or students who are expected to care for their younger siblings while their parents are out of the house at work or doing other things. And in particular, in the context of COVID, there's the issue of caring for sick or ill family members. On top of all of this, we know that students, if they are learning from home, they may not have their own sort of space, their own desk and area to devote to their studies. So it's simply, in our view, a fact of the world that a lot of our students are sort of not necessarily able to do fully engaged remote learning on a 24/7 kind of schedule, right? The connections that they use or the spaces that they require are not necessarily available all the time. So part of this is social, is that home is not the same environment as university. There's, you know, other distractions that are not present, children, pets, so forth. And a lot of these then dovetail with the challenges posed by connectivity, particularly in at least some areas of the Eastern Cape. So we know that some, in particular rural locations, are places where students may not have a good internet signal at home, like if they're, for instance, live somewhere that doesn't have good cell phone reception. There's also power outages, not just load shedding, but also issues like service reduction. Those of us who are here in Makonda will know all about the light switch rave that our municipality had the other day, but there are faults and burnouts and so forth. There's also issues of equipment, so devices that students use to access an online teaching and learning system can break, or they can be borrowed by siblings or parents or neighbors or friends, or they can be stolen, which I guess is borrowed without permission. But yeah. And also in particular in this context of where you imagine a student who might be sharing one computer with perhaps a sibling who is also studying at a different university or who is studying in school, they might be in a situation where they have to share one sort of quantity of data between two people. There was a post a while back on Rhodes Confessions that illustrated this quite nicely. I don't know most of the details because of course this is anonymous, but this is a student posting about their own experience of having to climb a hill to be able to get adequate signal reception so that they could at least try to participate in online learning. And what we know comes along with that is that the nature of that connection, like even though this is a student who has internet access, that does not necessarily mean that they will be able to participate in real-time Zoom meetings or other sorts of things. Yeah, I think Mark did some calculations about cost of access as well, so I'll hand over to Mark.
Yes, it struck me at the time that there was a lot of discussion about how difficult, how expensive data was, and how this would factor into online learning. So because I also access the internet through my mobile phone, I don't have DSL or anything like that at home, I thought, let me actually try and work out how much this actually costs for my particular very school that I was teaching to the first years. And I tabulated that and I actually put it into my course outline. So at the most expensive data rate that I could find, I came to the total cost of the course being about 27 Rand for 500 megabytes, which is actually remarkably low considering what I had expected. I thought it would be hundreds of rands to access the course. Now, obviously this does, it is dependent on the video lectures. So if you're going to download the video lectures in high definition, then obviously it's going to cost more. But on the other hand, if you choose, say, a more respectable download rate, you could actually drop those costs quite substantially. What was particularly notable to me was that this is actually, if it costs, say, 30 Rand round figures to access my 6 weeks of Linguistics 1 lecturing, that is less than it probably takes, well, than it costs to take a taxi from your home to the university and back again in one day. So effectively, the cost of accessing university physically for one day might be more expensive than accessing an entire module online. So I think when we talk about the cost of access, we've got to balance cost of data access with the cost of physical access as well. And usually we don't talk about that. We imagine students arrive on campus as if that were to be completely cost-free, which obviously it is not. Right. So when we were thinking about how do we reimagine a lecture in the context of a national health crisis, and I think we've got to recognize that when we talk about traditional lectures and traditional tutorials, for lack of a better word, that that way of doing things arose over many years, maybe even many centuries in various contexts, to meet particular student learning and institutional needs. And ultimately, those are compromised. So, we experience this very much in very large classrooms. When a lecturer is lecturing to 300 students, that is certainly a compromise on individual attention. On the other hand, if the lecturer were to have to lecture individually to 300 people, then it would be almost impossible to actually get anything else done. So one has to realize that lectures and tutorials don't come from no place at all. They address certain needs. However, some of those needs may have changed over time. So especially in the context of the national health crisis, one of the new needs that we have is to be able to teach remotely, or to be able to provide educational offerings that are accessible to people beyond the physical classroom. On the other hand, some of those needs remain true today as they probably were 300, 400, 500 years ago. Namely, and these are the things that really matter, I think, to a lot of lecturers, is the need to develop knowledge and also to acquire disciplinary identities and subjectivities in interactive ways in more or less smallish groups that allow some kind of personalized attention. So what's really important to me as a lecturer is not just conveying a certain amount of linguistic content, but is also, I'm trying to get my learners to become linguists, to be able to say, I not only studied linguistics, but I am a linguist now. And that is quite difficult to do if you want to just plonk some data online, as like a video online there, and expect people to be able to understand it. So I think it is quite problematic to simply take the traditional lecture tutorial way of doing things and to plop it online. Let's say we just upload a video to YouTube or just upload a video to RUconnected and expect that learning is going to happen in exactly the same way. And that is because the reasons that gave rise to those traditional ways of doing things have actually changed. So we need to be aware that what we call plopping stuff online is very limited. And I realized this fairly early on because I was lucky enough, in America, a prominent linguist created a Facebook group called Online Linguistics Teaching, Questions, Tips, and Tricks, where people from all around the world with a variety of different constraints placed upon them by various types of lockdowns all contributed. And what became really clear, to me at least, was that simply using Zoom to do a traditional lecture was just not going to work for our students, notably, of course, because of data access. But also, I think, because it's really just doesn't take the opportunities seriously that we were presented with. So I think there is an opportunity to reimagine tutorials and lectures into new ways of teaching and learning. And that is fundamentally what we attempted to do and what we're reporting on today. So what were we looking for? Well, a whole range of things, and these ones that are on the screen shouldn't be too surprising. We wanted something that would use relatively little data, because notwithstanding the fact that perhaps accessing data could be relatively cheap if you chose your providers, correctly, we still have problems not only with the cost of data, but also just with access. If you're in a rural area, then you might not have access all the time. And I myself know this very well because my telecom provider regularly drops out in poor weather. Okay, so we wanted something that used relatively little data. We wanted something that had inbuilt asynchronous access, but with, I like to think of it as a live feel. So it mustn't feel like you're reading the newspaper from 3 years ago. It must actually feel as though there is some activity happening and it is online, even though it may be asynchronous at that particular time. We also felt that when students are at the university physically, there's certain spaces that create a semiosis that is amenable to learning. So there's a physical campus that is, kind of separated in a way from town in its own way. There are physical lecture spaces, there are tutorials, there are library spaces, and everyone around you is kind of engaged in the process of being a university student. So when you're on campus physically, the space is actually important for getting you to your classes on time and making sure that you actually are learning. Online, however, because people are necessarily separated geographically, we need to create an online space that facilitated learning in some way. And luckily for us, we have RUconnected, which I think is already goes about 90% of the way towards creating those kinds of spaces. And so we decided we were going to build on that. We also wanted to recreate a space that allowed for a variety of approaches to learning. And what I mean by that is the following. If you just take a video of yourself lecturing and plop it online, then sure, the students are going to get a sense of transmitted information, right? So they'll listen to you and may or may not do anything with that. So the mode there is kind of transmission teaching, if you like. And the idea is that they download something and absorb it, and somehow in the process they learn. But I think we all recognize the limitations of those kinds of transmission modes. And so we wanted to have a space that would allow some kind of interaction as well. Maybe put more technically, going beyond Web 1.0 and coming to Web 2.0. So yeah, so the way it looks is like this. So we have on our RUconnected pages, this is an extract, a few screen grabs from one of my courses. This is one topic in RUconnected. You'll see there's a nice little picture there that it's about complex sentence structures. And there are various links to PowerPoint slides and the video podcast, etc. Just so that you can just get a sense of what the feel of it was. And as you'll see, there's a link to the reading, which we call the manual chapter. There's a quiz, which I personally have not attempted, but every week there was a quiz on the stuff that we covered. And towards the bottom, you'll see a link to the weekly workspace for online support. And that is what we're going to be talking about today, which in behind the scenes is this beast called Slack. And the idea there was that students could download the lecture both via PowerPoint and kind of in audio or video format. And then having gone through that and thought about it, they had an opportunity to engage in their online weekly workspace.
Okay, so I will tell you a little bit about what Slack is. Mark and I actually sort of each independently around the same time landed up on this as our chosen platform for doing online engagement with students in Lane 1. And that's why we're talking about this together. So what is Slack? Slack is a cloud-based messaging and workspace platform. It is pitched mainly at businesses. The similar to RUconnected is meant in respect to the cloud-based messaging and workspace platform, not in respect to the pitched mainly at businesses, obviously. But so it's this tool that's designed for sort of corporate teams to keep in touch with each other and have engagement of that sort. And it offers basically something like a hybrid of a chat room and maybe an online forum and an email or listserv and something like a Google Drive or a Dropbox sort of file sharing. And what I mean by a hybrid of those things is it is mainly text-based communication, so you type back and forth, but then also you can add attachments of various sorts, and there are a whole heap of add-ons that can do various other things. And it's individualized in a way that I think is useful in that each student, once they make an account, anytime they go back and log in, they get routed right back to the same course-specific chat that they were looking at the last time. So what does it look like? Here's a screen grab. This is from my module. So this is the phonetics and phonology chunk of the Linguistics 1 course. What you can see is over on the left, we have sort of a navigation bar. And then in the middle, there's sort of a main chat. And one of the things that we have found very useful about Slack as a platform is that it allows you to structure chat with students into threads. So this center pane in the view that you see on my screen is sort of back and forth questions with various students. There's one called Corbin, there's one called Carmen, and so forth. And then this other pane off to the right is sort of drilling down into one of those particular conversations. So you can make replies to individual posts that get structured together. The way we used it in our first year course is we made what in Slack parlance is called a workspace, one workspace for the whole Ling 1 course. And then students sign up for that, and it's free to sign up, of course. And then within that quote unquote workspace, each module of the course has its own channel. So just to hop back here, you'll see that there's a sounds channel, that's for the sounds of language module. There's a syntax channel, that's for the syntax module. There's a discourse analysis channel, that's for the discourse analysis module. And then there's a general and a random and ones for other modules. So it sort of offered a way to bundle together the disparate modules that make up the first year linguistics course under one kind of umbrella, such that the students only need to log into one site. We also found that it's useful or easy to add ad hoc channels. So one of the ones that wasn't in that list on the side there, but that we have used is to have like breakout rooms for tutorial groups, or to have a section of the sort of conversation that is dedicated to questions about an upcoming test or assignment, and so forth. And there are various add-ons that make it possible to do other useful things that are maybe less intuitive to do in a straightforward chat. So for instance, polls or anonymous question asking. So we thought we'd just bring a couple of screen grabs to show off, not show off, just show some of the useful features of this platform. So one is that it supports images quite effectively. So this is a syntactic tree. These are a nightmare to try to draw in text if you wanted to even attempt such a thing. And so if we had a platform that only allows text messages back and forth, it would be difficult to talk about different ways of drawing, different possible trees for the same string of words. So this is an example of the kind of thing that is facilitated by being able to do stuff like just paste a picture into a text-based thread. You can also have different threads, as I mentioned. So this was just a quick example of that. So what you have here is me saying hello, and then various students each coming with different questions about different things, and you can respond to each of those questions individually without sort of cross spread. So this person who's asking about why some people pronounce th as f, that has nothing to do with someone who's looking for examples of voiced consonants and voiceless consonants, so we can parcel out those replies so that it makes the whole space seem less crowded. There's also an add-in that allows you to do polls. For instance, if we want to ask for feedback about online lectures or recorded lectures. And there's also some useful messaging characteristics. So one is that you can tag particular participants. So this is Mark posting a message awarding some medals to, are those tutors? Some of them are tutors, some of them are students, I think, right?
They were students.
Oh, they're all students, okay. So awarding medals to students is fun. You can also have direct messages. So a student can ask a question privately. So this one has asked about the syllable structure of this word Atlantic. And it's nice to be able to have that kind of one-on-one engagement alongside having a bigger group. Is, to my mind, feels very much like, you know, walking around a tutorial room and talking to each student individually. So it's nice to be able to do that sort of one-on-one together with one-on-group kinds of interactions. And also, there's an add-on that allows students to post anonymously. So for instance, if they feel shy, here's a student who was a little bit unsure about how to reference the course manual, which, okay, maybe they've been taught that once or twice or 3 or 6 or 10 times, or maybe it's just been mentioned and they've missed it 6 or 10 times, or maybe they just need to be told more than once, like me. So it's nice that even if a student is feeling a little bit bashful, they are still able to engage and to see the results and to engage in this back and forth based on it. So that's sort of what Slack is. Oops, excuse me. And then in the closing bit, we wanted to just sort of share some of our insights based on our experience using this as a platform to complement RUconnected so far. So here's a side-by-side comparison of early on an attempt to do a tutorial by chat in the RUconnected chat feature, which is a great tool for synchronous interaction, but kind of difficult for asynchronous interaction, right? So this is the RUconnect chat room view on the left. You have a bunch of people talking about various things, greetings going back and forth, and messages each time a person loses or regains their internet connection and leaves or returns to the room, a little message, and that sort of adds a lot of clutter. Whereas if you have this thread-based organization, I think that that's much easier for students to engage with asynchronously. So it's great to make an appointment for a designated time, like this is our appointed hour for doing tutorial conversation chat on Slack. But if a student has load shedding then, or runs out of data just before then, or what have you, they can still go back and view. And what they'll see looking back in retrospect on Slack is this sort of thread that's on the right, where it seems much more like a simple back and forth without all this metadata that the system needs. I'll pass back to Mark now to tell you a little bit about some of the other pros and cons.
So when we initially started teaching, we were using a kind of a hybrid between Slack on the one hand for certain kinds of interactions, and then we attempted to use RUconnected chat to facilitate our tutorials. And it just became really clear that RUconnected chat wasn't actually suited to the task. For instance, one of the things that Will didn't mention was that when you enter the RUconnected chat forum, chat room, you don't see the text that has come before. So and the only way you can see, so it's not really asynchronous even, right? It's very synchronous insofar as if you leave the room and come back, all the history is erased. So that means if you come into the chat room 5 minutes after the start, you won't have the benefit of anything that's gone before. Unless, of course, you click on the looking at the historical data, and then you'll get the kind of image that appeared on the previous slide. But let's look at some of the pros and cons that we experienced with Slack. First of all, because it's mainly text-based, there is relatively low data usage. So initially I was a little concerned. I thought, well, you know, if I'm uploading videos and I've got various pictures and things, won't that increase the data usage? And And what I was really surprised by is that at the end of my first month of teaching, I checked on my phone, and what I discovered was that my Slack account had used 27 megabytes of data. I think the next month it went up to about 35 megabytes, and then has been declining ever since. And I think that's actually really useful. So this is not the kind of platform that's going to stream everything in high definition. So it's quite unlike Zoom in that respect. Another advantage is that it's available on multiple platforms. So you can install Slack on your desktop computer and access it as a standalone application on your computer. You can access Slack through your internet browser, and you can also install Slack as an Android app and use it from your phone. So that was actually a nice thing about it, because it meant that no matter what kind of device people had, they'd be likely to be able to access Slack in some ways. And in fact, I personally have used it both on my phone and on my computer, sometimes at the same time. I think we find Slack, it's visually appealing. You can use bullet points and some basic fonts and styles. So you can do bold font and italic fonts, and you can use a nice variety of emojis. What you can't do though is really go crazy with the formatting, right? So you can't really, post a whole lot of text in I don't know, the latest crazy font, make it 36 points, etc. And that is actually useful because it means that you don't end up with a lot of format clutter. So there's just enough, I don't know, font ability to be able to, I think, emphasize things and draw attention to things and to break up your work without going crazy and having multiple colors, etc. It's also very simple to attach pictures, videos, files of any kind. And I also found it quite useful to be able to curate the threads. So by that, I mean, you end up with a thread, which you develop dynamically in a teaching situation. But then afterwards, at some points, I felt this would be a good thread to keep for the future so that students logging in asynchronously at a later point can actually go through it. And then what I would do is I would delete some of the extraneous posts that I felt weren't really contributing, etc. And in that way, I was able to, I think, create fairly coherent threads that could actually function as a learning resource for students logging in at a later point. Will has already measured the possibility of creating these private side groups. And that means that students can create groups to talk privately together that the lecturer has no real control over. But at any point, the lecturer can be invited in by one of those students. So there's a real sense of privacy there. So if students want to work together, 3 at a time on a particular project, but then they want to invite the lecturer or the tutor in at any point, they simply have to tag them and you're allowed to go in there. So another privacy feature which I particularly liked and which Slack actually shares with the RUconnected is that you can limit the logons from particular domains. So when we first started the lockdown in various parts of the world, Zoom bombing became quite a feature where, because of privacy, or well, I guess not dotting your I's and crossing your T's from a privacy perspective, led to certain unfortunate side effects happening in online lectures. And so it was quite important to us that we limited where people could log in from, so that we wouldn't have hackers from, I don't know, Argentina or God knows where, logging into our teaching platform and basically causing havoc. And Slack does allow you to limit that. So we basically said anyone with the RUACZA domain name could log in, which meant, of course, students had to log in using their official Rhodes emails, but that didn't actually turn out to be much of a problem. There are some cumbersome aspects of it. For instance, if there are 2 people sharing one device, like imagine Will and I now are working from one computer, then when you turn on your computer and log in, it tends to log in as the same person. Whereas it would be quite difficult to switch between users on a single device, we imagine. So sharing might be a bit of an issue. You've also got to look through the add-ons. So there are really many add-ons, hundreds, but a lot of them are either not appropriate, being designed mainly for business, or require a certain amount of money to be paid. So some of them, for instance, will have a free 2 weeks, and then afterwards you have to pay some money. But that said, there are still many apps that we found that were actually free and quite useful for us. For instance, the anonymity bot, which has quite a nice feature in it. You can adjust the name of the anonymity bot. So if you like, it could actually respond as Noam Chomsky or whoever you wanted to. Okay. Another con of Slack is that it can be a bit clunky and unintuitive when you're setting it up for the first time. It asks for your login details and then various kinds of links, and you've got to link your Slack account with the shared workspace, etc. And if it all goes well perfectly at the beginning, you're fine. Of course, if it doesn't go perfectly, it's quite difficult to somehow get it to work. That said, most of our students seem to manage to log in just fine, and I suspect they're just more technologically literate than perhaps I am. The other thing is that it does require some internet. So it's not as simple as, say, just downloading a couple of videos and being able to watch them, because you can, while you can browse the Slack forums offline, if you respond, you need some internet in order for your question, of course, to be uploaded. And that means, of course, that it is inherent in the nature of interaction. There has to be some connectivity somewhere. So this is probably not suitable for our students some of our students who found themselves in completely offline situations and who thus required the paper packs. Okay, we are drawing towards the end of our talk now. So we want to just reflect on a few of the things that we've learned along the way. I think perhaps the most important thing, and if you could go home with this one thing learned, I think this would be valuable enough. And that is that simply taking a lecture or a tutorial as you would normally do it and plopping it onto an online platform such as RUconnected or YouTube or any other is not going to be sufficient. While it is possible to do, and I saw this a lot in my American colleagues who, because they had great data access both for themselves and their students, tended to favor using Zoom lectures. Whereas I feel that as South Africans, and maybe particularly as Rhodes staff, because of we were very sensitive to the paucity of our data context, we were forced to think a bit more creatively. And I think that helped us in the long run, because I think it forced us into ways that were better, as opposed to kind of being a little bit lazy and trying to do traditional things in traditional ways in online forums. So I would just encourage people to think of this as an opportunity to reimagine what a lecture can be and to reimagine what learning can be in different kinds of online spaces. The other thing we want to point out is that technology is not the panacea to everything. It doesn't ensure engagement. Technology doesn't make people talk. People make people talk. And that's why it's so important to have an engaging lecturer, have engaging and well-trained and enthusiastic tutors who remain at the heart of the academic project. Ultimately, it's people that make people talk. But on the other hand, technology can both facilitate and inhibit engagement. And we experienced that to some extent with the RUconnected chat forum in particular, where we initially attempted to have tutorials in that space, and they didn't work. You know, after a week or so, it just became very clear that wasn't going to work.
We also tried forums as well, I believe, right?
Yes, and yeah, no, Will's correctly pointed out we tried a number of RUconnected forums as well. You know, with varying degrees of compromise on what we wanted. You know, and I think depending on what assumptions one starts out with or what one wants, any of those kinds of solutions could be adequate. But for us, the forums didn't give us that live feeling, as it were. And we tended to get very kind of long, chunky answers. And ultimately, the students stayed away and did not come to their tutorials in those forums. So it just didn't really work for us. And this is maybe an example of technology that inhibits, can inhibit engagement. But nevertheless, I must emphasize that RUconnected was otherwise remained absolutely central to the entire course. None of this would have been possible if we didn't have RUconnected to lend the cohesion that was so important. You want to avoid a situation where students have to kind of, you know, they access something on YouTube for one course, another course it's a WhatsApp group, it's Facebook for the next module, and Slack for another thing. That can be very disconcerting, and students are going to lose track along the way of, do they need to be in the WhatsApp group, or do they need to be in the Facebook Messenger, etc. And RUconnected is absolutely central in providing a sense of cohesion. So students knew they could go to RUconnected, they scroll down to the topic of the week, and there would be the link to wherever they needed to go. But yeah, so it's not RUconnected that was the problem. It was really just that particular chat forum function. Okay. And then finally, the details matter. You know, I think we've all been guilty at some point of winging it a little bit, of deciding, you know, we can change things along the way, or deciding as we go. And of course, that is all an important part of having a dynamic teaching process. But when you're working online, details do matter. Like, for instance, it is not sufficient to put the link to your Slack workspace in your course outline, because that would assume that students are going to read it. So you've got to put it prominently in a place where students can actually find it. Small things like putting pictures on your RUconnected page make a big difference. Setting your Slack username to something that is accessible is all important. So it is important then to take a bit of time to think through what you want to achieve, and to sweat that small stuff, because it's all important in the end. Thank you. I think that brings us to the end. We're open for questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Will and Mark. That was really interesting. I've asked folks to type in questions in the text chat, or type in if they want to ask their question. So I had one. I was curious how many students participated in Slack as a percentage of the class.
Yeah, I think I'll try and answer that. The answer is I think relatively small number in last semester, but a bigger number this semester. To be honest, and we actually have a comparison between how many participated in Slack versus how many participated in RUconnected, the RUconnected chat forum. With the RUconnected chat forum, I have an average of about 5 students out of our class of 300 engaged, and that number steadily went down over time. So it was just really not working. With Slack, it's a little bit harder to say because I haven't done the exact number, but I'm imagining it was 15 to 20 students and last semester. And that number seems to have gone up more recently. So it's a bit difficult for me to estimate for the current set of courses, but I'm thinking it might be 32 to 40. So we are looking at very small numbers engaging at all in online learning. Of course, when it comes to assignments, then many more submitted, but there was a problem getting engagement of any kind.
Yeah, it's probably also worth adding. Are you muted?
I can.
Okay, I'll just talk on Mark's microphone. It's probably also worth adding that what precipitated us giving this presentation is that some of our students from Ling went to some of their other courses and asked if they could use Slack, is my understanding. Clearly they seem to like it, at least to find it tolerable.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, thanks very much for reminding us of that. So yes, we were approached by a lecturer who said, you know, my students were using Slack in linguistics and they want me to use it and I don't know where to start. So I thought, okay, let's go straight to you guys who have used it and ask you for some tips and also some pointers for folks. And then Ralph, Tracy K and Ralph here, they said, perhaps you could talk briefly about how we've been using Slack for our Ling tutorials and how it allows continuous monitoring by the tutors during the day and how this compared to the small group RUconnected chats we tried before.
Sorry. Yes, absolutely. In fact, I think Tracy Kitchen is particularly well suited to talk about this herself. So I'm going to hand over the microphone to her in a bit. But it is important to note that although Will and I are giving the talk today, this was in no way just Mark and Will doing their own thing. This was a collaborative effort at the first year, by all the first year lecturers and all the first year tutors, and also Tracy Kitchen, who is our BEd coordinator. So this, what we're presenting is very much a group experience. I will talk a little, okay, so initially when we started, we used Slack for the quote unquote lecture equivalent, okay? Okay. And then we tried to use RUconnected chat for tutorials, mainly because we could use the groups function in RUconnected. And it didn't really work very well, and I've talked a little bit about that in the talk. So the way we've been doing tutorials has been kind of evolving in the last couple of months. We started off with the RUconnected chat, we moved to RUconnected Q&A forum, and we moved to RUconnected general forum. And now we are trying using a Slack channel for tutors. And the idea there is that instead of breaking into different tutorial groups, we have tutors who are, let's call them, that they go on duty at a particular time and monitor the feed for an hour or two, and then hand over to the tutor following that, so that at any point there is someone there. I don't know if Tracy or Rolf would just like to comment as well. Tracy in particular, I think, it works very closely with our Bachelor of Education students and has very, very direct knowledge of how they experience it.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? I just want to make sure that you can. Okay, great. Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Mark was saying. We've found that it's been very useful for our tutorials in Ling 1 and also in Ling 2 and 3. So as Mark said, instead of breaking students into groups, we've decided to do like one big chat with the tutors being online at specific times. And one of the biggest problems that we were concerned about when we were looking at how we're going to tutor is that we needed to make sure that we didn't overburden our tutors as well. And this way, each of them get an hour slot and they're online for that specific time, and then someone else takes over. And like Mark was saying, this means that there's always someone online on the specific day to answer questions. And if a particular tutor's time is up, there's someone to take over after that. So students are able to be there for as long as they like and ask as many questions as they like, and there will be someone to answer those questions for them. And from my experience, it seems that that's been working a lot better than using smaller RUconnected forum chats. Yeah, I've really enjoyed using it, and there seems to be a lot more engagement. I know that earlier Mark was saying that there isn't a lot of engagement from students, but if you look, it does show you on Slack how many participants there are and how many there are online. So there's a big possibility that there are more people on Slack and just watching what's going on, then they are engaging, which I still think is better than having no one attending at all. And there's definitely been a bigger uptake this term. And yeah, we really enjoyed using it, and I think it's been a worthwhile experience. So yeah, I hope that some of you might be able to take what Mark and Will have spoken about and use it for your courses.
Just to follow briefly up on, sorry, echoing into infinity. Just to follow briefly up on that, one of the things that I found to be surprisingly nice about doing remote teaching and learning, and on the note of reimagining, as Mark said, is that even with a large number of people signed in, it does not become overwhelming to have a chat among, say, 5 or 10 of them. So I found in particular that for the first year course that Slack was a great way to make a large group feel sort of more intimate in the way that we traditionally count on a tutorial to feel, which is nice.
Cool, thanks, Will, and also, yeah, and Tracy. I think one of the what I'm hearing also is that you weren't just thinking about your content. You actually using Slack helped you think about a facilitation strategy and a space. And I do want to just mention for folks, we're pro people going, outside of RUconnected and using other tools. I think it's great that people are exploring different things and how you can supplement using a variety. I know many lecturers are not even, don't want to use WhatsApp because they don't want their phone number to be accessible to students. And I think maybe Slack offers a way to have a channel that doesn't involve giving students your phone number, right? You don't need to put your phone number on Slack. Am I correct? You're muted.
You don't, just your email address is all that's needed.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and I know the RUconnected chat is quite hideous. Yeah, so we're also looking at, I mean, we know RUconnected, the chat is quite hideous and we're aware of a lot of the cons that you mentioned. So we're actually even investigating, what chat options are out there that don't rely on, a phone number, that can just have an email address. Okay, I see, Mark, you've said about 140 students are logged in on Ling1's courses on Slack. Okay, so even if they're lurking and not participating, they are there. Although a small number participate actively, asking questions. Yeah, I see, Ralph, you want to take the mic? Over to you.
I just wanted to say also that one of the nice things about Slack is that it is instantaneous. And sometimes there is a little bit of a lag if you're using the RUconnected forums. Sometimes the posting does take a little bit of time to come up. And one of the nice things about Slack is that it's an instant message platform.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. So it's also how to use, so there's synchronous benefits and there's asynchronous. As Mark was saying, students would come back and they could still benefit from it. Yeah, and I think very importantly, Mark, you're saying, your tutors were absolutely instrumental in helping you find a suitable way of conducting tutorials. So did you have to teach your tutors how to use Slack, or was there any particular process that you used with the tutors?
To be honest, I don't think so. I mean, in many ways, the students were leading us in when it came to how we created the tutorial space. It was the tutors that alerted us to some of the problems with the RUconnected chat. And when we said, well, let's try a Slack for that, they seem to get on board pretty quickly. I think they just maybe the technology comes more naturally to people without a technological accent like me. I'm not really sure, but we didn't have any particular training process for the tutors. They just seem to pick it up pretty naturally. I don't know if Tracy can recall.
Yeah, I don't think we did any kind of training. A couple of our tutors are third-year students themselves, and I know that Mark was using Slack with the second and third years also as a lecture and tutorial space. So I think that a lot of them picked it up from there. But otherwise, no, they kind of just took to it, as did the students. It might have taken a day or two, but everyone kind of managed to figure it out quite quickly.
Thank you, Tracy. So folks, any more questions?
I just had one addition, since we were talking about tips and tricks and how to use before. The one problem that I encountered several times with Slack is students sort of getting a little bit confused about the login process, which is, in my experience, quite unintuitive. So once you sort it out, it's great, but that is one locus where sometimes students stumble, where I believe if you click on a link to join a Slack channel, if you do not already have a Slack account, it takes you to a page that looks exactly like the login page, or vice versa. But once we got over that, the students seemed to have no trouble expressing themselves on the platform.
Great, thank you. So it's now 3:27. So, okay, Undine says just try to log into the demo with RU credentials. It won't let me. I also tried with my Google account, but I'll keep trying. Any tips for us? Oh, that's what you meant. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of very positive things to say about Slack, but getting started, it's certainly not one of them. It either works or it doesn't, and then you get caught in a bit of a loop. But yeah, there you go. So Rolf, who might also be Tracy, says you need to make a Slack account first before you can log in. Yeah. So once you got it right, it'll log you in seamlessly every single time. It's fantastic. But to get started is a pain. So it's certainly not a platform that is, that has solved all the problems.
Thanks so much, and hopefully folks can play around and get a feel for Slack. It might work for you, might not, but yeah, we invite you to try. And thank you very much, Will and Mark, for sharing your experience with us.
Thank you very much, everybody, for listening so patiently. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's amazing. Really cool. Really cool.
Okay, and if you have colleagues that are interested and couldn't attend the session, we'll be putting a recording on the RU Teaching Online site, so you can just direct them there. So keep warm and well, everyone, and thanks for joining, and special thanks again to Will and Mark. Okay, keep well, everyone. Bye.